October 23rd, 1086, a vast plain near Badajoz. Two armies stand on opposite sides of the horizon. Thousands of men are waiting. None of them knows who will still be alive when the sun goes down. On one side stands the king of León and Castile, Alfonso VI, the man who captured Toledo, the man whose armies had pushed deeper and deeper into Muslim lands, and who now believed that the conquest of Al-Andalus was within reach. On the other side stands a man who has crossed the sea from North Africa. He does not rule Córdoba. He does not rule Seville. He does not rule Toledo. But he has brought with him an army unlike anything Alfonso has faced before. Yusuf ibn Tashfin, Emir of the Almoravids, a ruler whose arrival will change the balance of power in Al-Andalus. But the real question is not, who won at Al-Zallaqa? The real question is, how did Al-Andalus reach this moment? How did a land that had once been one of the most powerful centers of the medieval world become divided among rival kingdoms? Why did its rulers turn to a power from across the sea for salvation? Why was Alfonso willing to risk everything? And on that single day, how did Yusuf ibn Tashfin turn a battle that seemed to favor his enemy into one of the most important Muslim victories of medieval Iberia? Half a century before Al-Zallaqa, Al-Andalus was a very different world. Córdoba, a great city, a center of knowledge, commerce, and political power. But the state that ruled this land would not survive. In 1031, the Umayyad Caliphate of Córdoba collapsed, and from its ruins, a new political order emerged, the Taifa kingdoms. In the world of the Taifa kings, the enemy was not always beyond the frontier. Sometimes he sat on the throne next door, and while the rulers of Al-Andalus fought among themselves, the Christian kingdoms of the north were growing stronger. Among them was a king who understood exactly what this division meant, Alfonso VI. Alfonso VI was more than a king seeking new territory. He understood that the division of Al-Andalus created an opportunity. And then came the moment that changed everything. Toledo, 1085. After years of political pressure and military struggle, the city fell to Alfonso. Toledo was not just another city. It was one of the most important political and strategic centers of medieval Iberia. Its fall sent a message across Al-Andalus. If Alfonso could take Toledo, then no Taifa kingdom was safe. For the rulers of the Taifas, fear had become reality. And in Seville, one man understood the danger better than most. Al-Mutamid ibn Abbad. He was powerful. He was wealthy. He had an army. But against Alfonso alone, it might not be enough. And so, the ruler of Seville faced a decision that would change the history of Al-Andalus. Al-Mutamid had money, a powerful city, and soldiers, but he needed something more. He needed an ally. And that ally was not in Iberia. He was across the sea, in North Africa. A new power had been rising, the Almoravids, and at their center stood a man unlike the rulers of the Taifa kingdoms, Yusuf ibn Tashfin. Yusuf was not an Andalusian king. He did not answer to the rulers of Seville. He ruled a growing power in Morocco. Yet a message had reached him from Al-Andalus, a request for help, a request for intervention, because Alfonso's advance was becoming too dangerous to ignore. Yusuf now faced a difficult decision: to cross the sea meant entering a war far from his own lands, a war shaped by rival kings, fragile alliances, and uncertain loyalties. Yet Yusuf chose to cross, and with that decision, the balance of power began to shift. In 1086, the Almoravid army crossed into Al-Andalus. It would join forces with the Taifa kingdoms. The objective was simple: stop Alfonso. But the numbers are far less certain. Medieval sources give dramatically different estimates for the size of the armies. Some accounts offer enormous figures. Modern historians are far more cautious. So, this film will not turn uncertain medieval numbers into modern facts. What is clear is that the Almoravid intervention dramatically changed the military balance. A new army had entered the war, and it was now moving north. The armies moved toward the place where history would soon give the battlefield a name: Al-Zallaqa. Before the fighting begins, another battle begins, the Battle of Nerves. Alfonso knew that a powerful Muslim army stood before him. Yusuf knew that Alfonso was a dangerous opponent, and neither side wanted to surrender the initiative. Messages were exchanged, warnings, demands, challenges, and finally, a decision: battle. Cut to dawn. But Yusuf was not looking for a chaotic clash. He needed the battlefield to work in his favor, and that meant controlling the timing, the terrain, and the moment when his full strength would appear. The morning of October 23rd, 1086, the armies moved. Alfonso's forces advanced toward the Muslim army. Heavy cavalry, infantry, banners, weapons. Across the field stood the forces of the Taifa kingdoms and the Almoravids. The first clash came quickly. Then the pressure increased. The Andalusian forces were pushed hard. Al-Mutamid and his men were caught in the heart of the fighting. The battle became brutal, close, personal. Medieval sources describe Al-Mutamid fighting in the battle and suffering wounds. But this was not a battle that would be decided by one man's courage. It would be decided by something else: the plan. In war, the most dangerous force is sometimes the one you cannot see. Yusuf ibn Tashfin had not committed every part of his force at once. Part of his army remained outside the main engagement, waiting, watching, and then moving. Alfonso's army pushes forward. The Andalusian forces are under pressure. Then another force appears. Alfonso's army had entered the battle, but it was no longer fighting a single force. The Almoravids began to apply pressure. The battlefield changed. The initiative shifted, and suddenly the army that had been attacking was fighting to survive. Came a desperate struggle to survive. Pressure came from multiple directions, and as the hours passed, Alfonso's army began to lose its cohesion. Then the withdrawal began, and the withdrawal became a rout. Alfonso survived, but his army had suffered a devastating defeat. The men who had entered the plain that morning would not all leave it alive. His could have been the end of the story. It was not. Yusuf ibn Tashfin had won, but Toledo remained in Christian hands. Alfonso's kingdom had not disappeared, and the Christian kingdoms of northern Iberia had not been destroyed. So, what had actually changed? something more important than the fate of a single city. The balance of power. The victory at Al-Zallaqa temporarily halted the Christian advance and strengthened Almoravid influence in Al-Andalus. And this is where the story becomes more complicated, because the men who had crossed the sea as saviors would soon become rulers. Yusuf ibn Tashfin had entered Al-Andalus to help the Taifa kings, but after Al-Zallaqa, the political balance had changed. The rulers of the Taifas could no longer ignore the power of the Almoravid army. The man who had come to save them now possessed the military strength they depended upon. And in the years that followed, Yusuf expanded Almoravid control over Al-Andalus. The Taifa kingdoms began to disappear, not because of Alfonso, but because the political order inside Muslim Iberia itself was changing. The victory at Al-Zallaqa had therefore done something unexpected. It had stopped Alfonso's advance, while simultaneously opening the door for a new power to dominate Al-Andalus. Centuries later, Al-Zallaqa remains one of the most famous battles of medieval Iberia. But historians face a problem. The sources do not agree on everything. They differ over the numbers. They differ over some details of the fighting. And medieval chroniclers often recorded events through the lens of their own time. So we should not tell the story as a legend. We should tell it as history. We know the larger picture. Yusuf ibn Tashfin crossed into Al-Andalus. The Almoravids joined forces with the Taifa rulers. Alfonso VI confronted them near Badajoz. The battle took place in October 1086, and Alfonso suffered a major defeat. What happened in every moment of the battle is harder to reconstruct with absolute certainty, and that distinction matters, because history is not simply the story of what people remembered. It is also the story of what we can establish, what we can compare, and what we must leave uncertain. On the morning of Al-Zallaqa, two armies entered this plain. By sunset, the history of Al-Andalus had changed. Toledo had not fallen back. Alfonso had not disappeared. The Christian kingdoms had not been destroyed. But something had stopped, the momentum of Alfonso's advance, and something else had begun. A new political force had emerged in Al-Andalus, a force that had crossed the sea from North Africa and proved itself on the battlefield. His name was Yusuf ibn Tashfin, and the name of that battlefield was Al-Zallaqa, 479 AH, 1086 AD. But this was not the end of the story of Al-Andalus. It was the beginning of a new chapter.